now so that we can have this for future reference. So I was trying to orient through the lens of a middle schooler, and I'm glad that that the question of time commitment came up. And as Shaylin mentioned, it's definitely going to be significantly less as a middle schooler, and that's where I was heading with my discussion on what the state of middle school competition or participation might look like. So a couple of years ago, we started to try and work with other schools to develop competitions. Obviously, everybody knows Pineview is a little bit different school, and not every school in the Sarasota County area has speech or debate teams. Although it's not uncommon at all. There are a handful that we identified, but it's also not something that can be put together in a week's time or even a year's time, or in some cases a couple of years' time. And turnover at the coach level is something that obviously doesn't help that, as I'm sure you all know. Now that Jim has been in for a couple of years, and he and the team are starting to focus a little bit more on that, I suspect that we will, as he mentioned, start to see more opportunities for the middle schoolers to compete. But it would be hard for me to imagine an environment where the middle schoolers would ever be at the same level of competition as the high schoolers. When they get into high school, the opportunities are, I would say, probably 15 local events, maybe 10 to 15 local events per year. And then as many national events or invitational events as individually you want to compete in. We've had some students in the past that almost every weekend they were going somewhere. That is more on their own than as a team. And that's their choice, right? For the most part, the team will have anywhere from another 6 to 10 or so invitational events, either state events or national events. And when we do national events, typically it's an event at Harvard or Yale. We've been to Emory. The national tournaments themselves, the end of the year tournaments, those rotate depending upon what city the tournament, the league is going to have them in that year, right? But Houston, DC, New York. So from that perspective, there is a great deal of competition that is out there. I don't want to portray the speech and debate environment like a high school football, right? But there's an awful lot of people within the community, and as Shaylin pointed out, it tends to get close knit, especially from the participants level. So
Mr. Gray, if I could add something really quickly. So in the past few years, at least since I've joined PF in the past 3 years, the event has become geared more towards middle schoolers. So I've been debating every weekend since the beginning of the season started this year. And so I went to Yale, Grapevine, and I was supposed to go to Milpitas this weekend, which is just another invitational national tournament. And all of them had middle school brackets this year, and this just wasn't a thing in the past. This is the first year, at least now, maybe because it's on an online platform, that they're able to do this. But this is something I think we're going to continue seeing, and also we're going to see more and more tournaments adopting a larger middle school bracket. So that means your child will also only be facing middle school students, and it's also more relaxed environment, but yeah, it's still in they're still competing at Yale. But that's just something that is interesting and good. And I think that's why we've seen more middle school participation this year, is because now there's actual opportunities that hopefully Rafa and I can get your children to the skill level, second, third quarter of the year, that they'd feel comfortable enough to be successful at these tournaments.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's great insight, and I think you probably hit it on the head, Shaylin. The fact that the tournaments are online now makes it a lot easier for middle schoolers and especially middle schooler parents to get comfortable with participation, right? Um, I know the idea of putting my sixth grader on a plane to go to DC to go to a speech or debate tournament. No, not unless I'm in the seat next to him. But online, sure, right? So that's I think that's a great insight, and I'm glad to hear that they continue to push that forward. And for everybody that's on this call, that should be great news for you. So we've got about an hour. I would say as a first instance, if anybody wants at any point needs to go get coffee, whatever, feel free, just come back in. Don't feel like you're at work or something, right? Because we would never slip out of a meeting at work to go do whatever we wanted to do. But make sure that you're comfortable and pick up as much as you can. I think for the most part, unless anybody else has general questions about speech and debate and what you can anticipate as far as your time commitment, their time commitment. If we have questions on that, I'd like to take those now. Otherwise, I'd like to try and get into the substance of what is debate. So before I get there, does anybody have any more questions, like how much time to expect or what can we expect?
I was just curious. I know there are these different types of debates. I know you signed up for forum. It's not that like we explored all of these.
Right.
Is there one of them has more commitment versus the other?
Right. No, it's a great question. That might be better answered when we're talking about the specific topics themselves.
Okay.
But absolutely, I mean, if I was in your shoes, I'd want to know that too, right? Because they won't balance their time. Okay. All right. So let's talk about the area of speech and debate that we call debate, right? It is split into primarily two different styles of debate: Lincoln Douglas and public forum. I say primarily because at the larger tournaments, other styles of debate are introduced and are available. But that really is a function of more participants that are there, right? The two styles of debate that you will see at just about every single tournament that you would go to are Lincoln Douglas and public forum. And I want to talk very briefly at a high level of the differences between the two from that high level. So public forum, that's a team event to start with, right? So you've got two debaters per team, two teams going against each other. Lincoln Douglas is an individual event, right? So there's one distinct difference. The substance of the debate itself is very different for those that really practice it. Lincoln Douglas is split into a philosophical debate as well as the substance of the debate that is of the topic given in front of you, right? So when I say a philosophical debate, what I mean is it is entirely expected in LD that you are trying to debate that the framework or the viewpoint that you should look at the issue through is different. So you'll hear things like a utilitarian framework versus a social contract, right? Versus the importance of the individual, right? Individual rights, okay? And in LD, skilled debaters will debate that this particular topic shouldn't be viewed through a lens of, the greatest good for the greatest people and the least amount of harm, right? Through a utilitarian approach, right? It should be viewed specifically and exclusively through the importance of the individual, right? Or through the importance of a social contract, right? So let me pause there for a second and just, let that sink in a little bit, right? Your middle schoolers are going to start to be thinking about philosophical thoughts and ways to view different arguments. Well, that's different, right? Public forum is more modeled after how the name sort of suggests, right? A public forum, right? And in the public forum, the viewpoint is that a utilitarian view is primarily the approach, right? Greatest good for the great. We can't solve every problem for every person, right? That's the primary view that you're looking at, but you still have framework arguments, right? So inside of debate, you'll have, when I say framework arguments, that philosophical view is what I'm calling a framework argument, right? So how does that come into play, right? So if you think about the substance of an argument versus the framework of an argument, you can be right on the substance, but wrong on the framework and lose the argument, right? Let me kind of put that into something that I'm going to guess all of us have experienced. Let's say that your child, maybe a middle schooler, is in an emotional fit and screaming at you, calling it an argument or a debate, right? Maybe this has happened in theory, but never to us. They may be 100% right in what they're saying. The odds of you agreeing with them at that point are pretty slim, right? That's sort of what I'm talking about with a framework argument, right? You may be right on that particular substantive issue, if the framework you're looking through is that particular one, okay? So LD is a little bit more nuanced in that respect. But it's not to say that you don't have framework arguments in public forum. You have them all the time, okay? So I guess the first thing that I want to impress on you is when it comes to debate, first, there's always a winner, there's always a loser. Sorry. Not everybody gets a trophy. Second, well, not everybody gets a trophy, but everybody is better. That's for sure. Second, when you're actually judging around, you have to think about judging in terms not just of the substance of what they're saying, but the framework under which they're positioning their arguments. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense when you actually, when you see it in action, it certainly makes a little bit more sense. Unfortunately today we don't have another debater with us. My son James is the captain of LD. He's an all-state band for right now. So I'm going to ask Shaylin to give some examples of, of what he might say during a round, and pick a topic and maybe talk through a little bit of his case and how a round might present, so that at least you've got something to work on. But before we get into that, I really want to impress on you YouTube. I mentioned it earlier. Jim, I think it was Jim or one of the students actually found a handful of YouTube videos on judging LD and judging PF. I don't want to discourage that. In fact, I want to encourage that, right? There's YouTube out there that you can actually see around in action, and then you can see how judges talk about it, right? So I encourage you to go there, but a word of caution. What you're going to see is usually going to be very, very fast talking. Very fast talking. If anybody knows what Z copy is, that's what debate is all the time. So Z copy is the lawyer's requirements that you'll hear at the end of for example, of the used car ads, where in 5 seconds or less, they read 10 paragraphs. That's what you'll see, right? When you hear things like spreading, that's speed reading out loud, right? Don't worry about that. Your middle schoolers are not going to be into that, okay? By the time they are involved in high school, they'll absolutely be able to fast talk, right? And when I only bring that up as a word of caution when you bring up the YouTube videos and you see, high school kids, or thank you, Shaylin, high school kids or even college kids debating, and you really can't understand a thing. Welcome to our world. And that is true. That is very, very true. Okay. You're not going to run into that until you start to get into a lot of experience. You're dealing with high school students and you're in out rounds. Okay. At that point, the tournaments have shifted you over really from a lay judge to an experienced or even sometimes a paid judge. I used a phrase there just briefly, out rounds. I want to remind you that the documents that were sent around have jargon pages in them so that you can start to understand your kids a little bit. Cool. Out round is simply, at most tournaments, you'll have a round that basically becomes a seed round. You'll have anywhere from 4 to 6 rounds. And based on the results of those 4 to 6 rounds, then you'll get into bracket style of tournament debate, right? Where winner advances, loser doesn't, okay? So an out round is that bracket style of competition, okay? But again, the key point is jargon. You're gonna get that from being at the tournaments, and you're gonna get that from the documents that we've submitted. So PF and LD, 2 different styles of debate. One has a philosophical view, one really doesn't. It just sticks to util basically. One is a team event, the other is an individual event. And then the mechanics, the structure of the debate itself is a little bit different just in terms of the time, and it's really because you've got 2 people, okay? So as a judge, let me start to turn the focus from the difference between the 2 debates to what's going to go on in a local tournament and or a national tournament, okay? So local tournament, and I'm going to speak from the viewpoint of an in-person tournament. The only difference at home is instead of sitting in a library, call it the judge's lounge, you're going to go to your kitchen and get your sandwich, right? Or last night's pizza, right? So from the viewpoint of an in-person local round, we're going to show up usually at the Publix at Bee Ridge, unless Jim changes it, Bee Ridge and Cattleman, usually between 6 and 7 o'clock in the morning. We're going to drive usually towards Tampa, and it's going to be on a Saturday. We're going to sit there for about an hour while all the teams show up. They get registered, and the tournament, what they call the tab room, the tabulation room, which is really just the coordinators, right? They're the people that are assigning competitors to a room and assigning judges to a room. That's called tab room. The website that we brought up a little bit earlier is now called tab room, tabroom.com. But that's based on what was going on, in paper days, right? So the tab room is going to coordinate. Meantime, parents will have breakfast snacks, coffee, juice, water, bad donuts, all the healthy stuff, right? Monosodium glutamate, FD&C yellow number 5, everything that you need for a good healthy body. And then they will start announcing what they'll do is they'll say a judge's call, right? And the judge's call is usually 30 minutes before a round starts in person, right? So the judge's call is just like it sounds. We're calling out the judges and what rounds you're going to be assigned to, right? Now through Tab Room, you're going to get that via text message or email, okay? And you're going to have time. And then usually through Tab Room, they'll ask you to check in 15 minutes before the round is officially supposed to start, just to make sure that technologically everything is working, okay? And then once the round starts, once you get into the room, you are in charge of that room. Okay. Whatever the rules are, you're supposed to abide by them. But if it's a judgment call, guess what? You're the judge, right? Most of the stuff is not going to be a judgment call, right? So for in person, you may be given a paper ballot. That paper ballot will list out the times for each of the different speech events. Shaylin, do you have something that shows out the times for PF in an event? The breakdowns?
Yeah, if you want to screen share the doc I sent you, or I can do that right
Yeah,
now.
if you can. If you can find it and screen share it, that'd be great. So your paper ballot will give you the times. On Tab Room, it will also show the times there. On Tab Room, it will give you a timer so you can push start. You're encouraged to bring your own timer. Okay, that's what the rules tell you. I will tell you that I have never timed a round in probably 500 to 1,000 rounds of judging. I always walk in and I tell the competitors, nobody's going to time you better than yourselves. You time your competitors, right? Everybody in that room except for me has got a timer going anyways. As far as the times on a round go, I always tell the competitors when the buzzer goes off, finish your sentence, finish your thought. If it's 5 seconds, 10 seconds, that's not going to win or lose a round. But if you want to continue talking for 2 minutes, you probably lost. Yeah. Okay. So here's round structure for PF. Okay. And again, you'll get this. These times will be in front of you either on paper or on Tab Room every single time. Okay. But this is the general structure of a PF round. Yes. And let me pause here for a second and maybe turn over to Shaylin if you kind of want to walk through, just give a little bit of color to each one of those sections and what's going on.
Okay. All right. So each PF team is made up of 2 people, right? So within that, they're split up between a first and a second speaker. I'm a second speaker. My partner Rafa is a first speaker. So at the beginning, we start off with case, which is obviously introducing our arguments in like the round. So both sides get up for 4 minutes and they read off like your computer a pre-written case that we've spent like a month preparing for. Then we get to something called the first cross. So once all the arguments are laid out in the round, both the first speakers that just went up and like spoke their case do like a cross check. So the best way I can make an analogy of it is like it's literally like a cross examination you'd see in like a courtroom, except like you ask a question and then they ask a question back. The point of this is like, one, if you don't understand maybe some nuance in your opponent's case, you get clarification. Another thing is if you see like a big gaping like logical fallacy, that this is somewhere where you can ask like a probing question and like force them to be uncomfortable and like show the judge that like there's some problems here. Once that ends, we go into rebuttal. So now that we have like the arguments laid out, this is like straight refutation. This is what I do. So I'd get up and for 4 minutes, I'm going down on my opponent's case, just responding to everything. Like the first refutation in the round. And then there's a second cross, which is between both the second speakers who gave rebuttals. I ask a question, they ask a question. And this is like more layered questions now because, we have like the arguments and the responses laid out in the round. Summary, which is going to be like the most important speech for you guys, is basically that there's going to be so much stuff like on your notes or like in your head in the round because both teams are reading 4 minutes of responses plus 4 minutes of like arguments in their first speech. So that's like 16 like minutes of just, a whole bunch of debatey stuff. This summary speech should be both sides like crystallizing it to one argument and making the round a lot more simple for you, right? So in 3 minutes, they're going to simplify, clean up the round, let you know where you should be looking to vote for this team and why you shouldn't be looking to vote for the other team. Then there's Grand Cross, which is like like the craziest part in the round where all four speakers are kind of asking questions and it's like a free for all. Here, like we sort of see some repetition in the questions, but yeah. And then final focus is like the second speaker gives this again, which is the final speech in the round. This is just taking everything in the summary speech and simplifying it even more, giving the judge like, you know, this is what we're winning and why you're voting for us here. And this one reason is why you're not voting for my opponents. Just really making it easy and taking it from that like 16 minutes of just a whole bunch of debate crap into like 2 minutes of specific important arguments and reasons why you win the round, making it like a lot easier for you to like vote on. And then the extras is that each team, based on the tournament, is giving 3 minutes of prep time. This is able to be taken by both. So each team gets 4 minutes of 3 or 4 minutes of prep time. It's been leaning towards for the past few tournaments I've gone to. So like before rebuttal, if I need some questions and I want to call Rafe, I'll like, you know, take 45 seconds of prep time and start my timer. Or a summary speech if Rafa needs help like evaluating what's going on in the round. We'll take 2 minutes there and like minute before grand final focus. It's just it can be used in between any of these. So in between cross, in between speeches, and it just helps each time each side like prep. If there's anything I missed, you want to add, Mr. Gray?
No, I think that's great. I think that's great. So from a judge's viewpoint, you're going to walk in, and I was just trying to get into tab room right now to show a ballot, and unfortunately, I can't go into last year's ballots and show you one. But I suspect if you
actually, I think I should be able to.
You can look at one. Oh, sweet. So if you can pull one up, that'd be great.
My mom judged last weekend, so let me see.
Yeah, that would be fantastic to walk through that. So the key there, most importantly, start with is tabroom.com. You should go there right now. You should create a profile. One of the things that's on there is a paradigm. Paradigm is just how is it that you judge, right? So for all of you, I can tell you that your paradigm should be, I'm a lay judge. I will typically start looking for classic argument. If you put that,
and that's something as well, sorry to interrupt, that Rafa and I can like help you guys before you guys are like able to judge a tournament. You can either ask your child or reach out to Mr. Froelich, and we have some like great in-depth parent paradigms that can, you know, allow like the students to adapt to your style, to just, you know, speak slow, clearly, and that kind of removes the jargon and like the fast speaking that would make judging difficult for you.
Right. That paradigm is your opportunity to describe or put any notes to competitors that you'd like. Okay. The key at this point is to make sure that you're telling them that you're a lay judge with little experience, and you're probably just going to look for classic arguments, right? Everybody went through middle school, high school, and you know you have the old. You put your summary at the beginning, and I'm going to tell you, here's my 3 points that I'm about to tell you. And then you go through your 3 points. Here's point 1, point 2, point 3, and then your conclusion. Here's the 3 points that I just told you, right? I mean, that's your typical classic argument structure. And for the most part, more than likely, when you start as a lay judge, if you tell the competitors that that's what you're going to be looking for, then that will give them a view in how to compete in front of you, right? And that's something that you know the students really need to learn, is that they have their debate styles and they will develop their debate styles. But just like in life, you have to oftentimes change your style based on the audience that you're speaking to, right? I can tell you without question that skilled debaters will debate entirely differently in front of me than they would in front of you. And they will debate entirely differently in front of me than they will in front of paid judges. Okay. When I've mentioned paid judges a couple of times. Usually those are college students or college grads that are debating in college. Sometimes they're in law school, but they literally are paid several $100s, sometimes $1,000 or more for judging rounds on a weekend. And when I mentioned the word spreading before, those are the judges that are judging the national tournaments, the out rounds on the national tournaments. And there you've got kids talking usually 300 plus words a minute. Right. There's nothing I can do at 300 words a minute. Yeah. The first time I was at Sunvite, and I had judged for about 2 years, and they had me in a panel of 7 for a quarterfinal round. It was a mistake that I was in there. They admitted that after, and they apologized to me and the competitors. Thankfully, the other 6 judges that were in there, it was not to them. It was a pretty clear debate. So mine was not the deciding round. But literally at the end, my feedback to them was I literally couldn't understand anything except at 2 different points, you, who I gave my ballot to, stopped and gave me what's called a roadmap, right? Or excuse me, a signpost, right? Signpost, if you think about writing an argumentative essay, signpost is just your topic sentence for that paragraph, right? It's this paragraph, this is my main argumentative point for this paragraph, right? Everything else that follows from it is just evidence to support that one main argument for this paragraph or in speech time, right? That was it. I heard 2 sentences out of 45 minutes of debate, and those 2 sentences got my ballot. It happened.
Hey, Bob, so just to clarify, when we are in judging, we're not the sole judge in that space.
Good point. So in a local tournament, well, no, in the preliminary rounds, most of the time, you are the only judge in that room.
Okay.
When it gets to the out rounds, most of the time there's a panel of 3, 5, or 7.
Okay.
At the national tournaments, there is always a panel at the out rounds.
Okay. Super helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So again, you're going to walk into a room. It's going to be you and 4 kids, right? Usually start by putting them at ease. I tell them, look, guys, this is your round. Sit where you want, stand, crawl, whatever you want to do. I'm not here to judge how you look or or what you act like. I'm here to judge the words that come out of your mouth and their impact on the words that coming out of their mouth, right?
Yep.
So as Shaylin mentioned, it's all timed rounds. You walk through the rounds. I'll let them know you use your timer, right? This is your round. I will tell them, assume that I know absolutely nothing about this topic.
Perfect. Yeah.
That's a key point. Okay.
Yeah.
Assume that you are tabula rasa, right? You're a blank white board. It's their job to write on that board. Okay. That's the viewpoint that I have always taken, right?
Okay.
And if you take that viewpoint, it's pretty hard for anybody to say anything against what you come up with, right?
Right.
That's their job, not yours. Okay.
Okay.
And explain that to them. Okay. Especially as middle schoolers, right? I can imagine that as middle schoolers, it might be a little bit more difficult. Well, I assumed you know that. Well, I'm sorry. That's not the way this game works.
Right.
So that's a good point. So from there, whether it's a in-person or live, they're going to start debating and you're going to start taking notes. Okay. And as a judge or even as a competitor, those notes are what's referred to as flowing the arguments. Okay. And everybody flows differently. Me personally,
Mr. Gray.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but before we go into like flowing and like actual in-round stuff, should we go over like flips and like helping them set up their ballot and which team is which?
Do you have were you able to get into a ballot on Tab Room?
Yeah, I found a ballot and I also explained both types of flips on my doc.
Yeah, I'm not so sure I
I
want to get into flips so much. If you could bring up a ballot, that'd be great.
It's not an actual one, it's a picture of one, but I think it should do.
So you're flowing the argument, which really just means that you're taking notes on what they're saying. Okay. And what I will typically do is I'll pull out my laptop just because I can type faster than I can write. And I can certainly read what I type a lot better than what I write with a pen or pencil. But a lot of people will use different colored pens and different colored pencils, write different colors for the different speakers so that they can identify at the end. Okay. Because at the end, your job is to fill out this form that's right in front of you right there. Okay. That's the requirement. It's a requirement that somebody won and that each one of those speakers are assigned points. Okay. Now you'll see the range of points up there is from 1 to 30. If you give somebody a 25, you basically told them they shouldn't have shown up. Okay. If you give them lower than a 25, they insulted you, right? And not just insulted you because they weren't prepared, they insulted you personally, right? That's basically what a student will read if you give them point totals like that, okay? Sometimes, as you'll see in the upper right-hand corner, it is steps of 0.1, right? Oftentimes it is just whole numbers, okay? But at the end of the day, you need to be filling out that ballot for each one of the individual speakers. Sometimes, especially on the out rounds, it is team points only. It is not individual. So don't be shocked if you just see points for a team and not individuals. Okay. And then you'll have to pick that drop-down box. The win goes to who? What side were they on? And you see a box there for low point win. You should almost never check that, and most tournaments will tell you that low point wins are not allowed. Okay. Ultimately, that's what you're looking for. Do you have an RFD, Shaylin, or no?
Yeah, actually, I think I have a layout RFD I can pull up.
Okay. So this is the only requirement. Many tournaments will also require what they call an RFD, a reason for decision. Okay. Now, the RFD is, boil it down to 1 or 2 sentences, okay? Not much more than that. You are given a separate tab or separate space to give notes to the individuals, okay? The RFD everybody sees. The separate tabs and notes are only, and it says it right on the screen. The separate tabs are only for the individual competitors to see. Okay. So what I typically do, especially if I'm on tab room, is I'll open up my laptop, I'll open up a Word document, and I will literally just start typing what I'm hearing. Okay. And then there's usually 15 seconds or so between some of the speakers. So in that 15 seconds, I'll just very quickly go back. What did I just hear? Right. It's going to stick out in your mind, right? You might be thinking, oh, it's not going to stick out. It will, right? I mean, this is what you guys have been doing since you've been born, right? Arguing with people, debating, right? So pick out your main points, then take that very brief time to organize what you just heard, and then listen for the next speaker, okay? The first things that are coming out of their mouth are usually, out of the first 2 speakers' mouth, is not anything to do with what the other speakers have said. It's their case, okay? After that, then you'll start to see, okay, we are now talking about the other people's case, and it's not just about supporting our arguments, it's about cutting against their arguments. Shaylin mentioned flips, right? That's just simply taking something, a position that somebody else says, and using it against them, right? Right? Pretty simple, right? Yeah, what you say may be true. I don't necessarily agree with it, but assuming arguendo that what you said is true, it actually hurts you. Okay, there's all kinds of ways that you can do that. Let your mind,
Mr. Gray,
run with it.
when I meant flips, I meant like the virtual coin flips to decide speaking position and sides.
Sure. Okay. So in terms of coin flip and who says what, sometimes the tournaments will assign that in advance. Sometimes they will not. It'll be very obvious to you, right? your ballot will either say that somebody is the AF or the neg, or it will not. And it'll be a drop down and you'll have to assign it. Okay. And if it is, you know what? I'm not sure I've done a virtual flip, Shaylin. We're all big people. We'll figure out how to flip a coin virtually and assign people to the sides.
No, so in tab room, there's like an allotted time where students decide the flips, and that means the judges don't have to do anything.
Right.
So all you got to do is before the round, make sure you refresh. And on the left side of the ballot, let's say it's like Pine View versus Riverview, be like Pine View is speaking pro first and Riverview speaking pro second. Just something you want to do is make sure to like refresh the ballot, because sometimes like judges, at least in my round, voted for the wrong team because they assumed like, Pine View was con when they were actually pro and it didn't update.
Yeah.
Shaylin, can I just to clarify that? So like for that, it's specifically for the virtual space, right? If we needed to have additional practice and just refreshing on that, we could get that before we go to, if it was a virtual judging that we were doing.
Oh, like, what do you mean by like refresh?
Just to your point, what you just said about with the ballot and all of that, because I'm just imagining it's one thing in person versus virtual. And right now we're talking about it from a standpoint of like in person, right? But in the virtual space, to your point about just refreshing your ballot, I would imagine some people in this space right here may not know what that will look like or what that will be doing. So I guess my question is, will there be a refresher for us prior to, if we find out it's actually going to be a virtual judging?
Yeah, so all tournaments prior to the tournament require something called a ballot test, which they give you a blank ballot with random team names, and your sole purpose is to like just set it up, type in something, and submit your ballot, and just make sure that you're voting for the right team and you know how to type everything in. And like it was my mom's first weekend judging last weekend, so I had to do like the ballot test to get comfortable with that format. And after that, she was good to go for the rest of the 6 months.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Fred, if you were asking if it's also the case that you can get refreshers on how to judge on a regular basis, every single tournament, every single time that you show up, somebody will be there that's more experienced, and you can say, "Hey, this is my first time," right? Yeah. And it's also absolutely the case that you can sit in and around as an observer of the judge.
That's super helpful.
Yep.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Yep. No, I've absolutely seen that done in person. It's a little bit easier and a little bit more helpful online. You know what? I've done it online, and then what I did online is after I submitted the ballot and cleared the room of the students, I walked through my notes with the judge and just as I just got done telling you, say, look, this is how I do it, right? You don't have to do it this way. You can do it any way you want. But what I do is I literally try and type everything that I hear. Then I take the time that's in between to absorb and in my own mind, try and pick out exactly what those arguments are. Good debaters will be blatantly obvious. Here's my 3 contentions. Contention 1 is this. Contention 2 is this. Contention 3 is this. And then they'll go back into, now to support contention 1, I have evidence A, B, C, and D, right? And that's what you'll hear. You'll hear Professor so-and-so in her article in 1987 submitted that this, and that, right? And that supports my contention, right? And that's all you're starting to look for, right? So you're starting to think, okay, do these arguments, does this evidence support their contention? Do their contentions support their conclusion? And is there impact, right? So yes, you can be absolutely right on everything, but if it doesn't impact people's lives, so what? Right? Great. You just proved that a tree does make a sound when it falls in a wood and nobody is able to hear. So what? We didn't hear it. Okay. And that's sort of delinking or impact. If you look at Shaylin's notes that he circulated, that's some of the concept that you got there, right? So great. So you've got overall reasons ranked for decision. Great. So you can see here is, what is it? 2-3 sentences. This is your RFD. Okay. the turkey argument, right? I think the case went under extended in con summary. Pro went up in turkey on buffer zones. Never really got the attack from con okay. So here, this is think about 2-3 bullet points that really what it all boiled down to. And if you think about Shaylin's summary of how the PF debate is structured at the end, there's a final focus. Well, PF, that final focus, more often than not, is going to be reflected in that RFD, right? The kids understand when they're winning and when they're losing arguments. They know it, and a lot of times it's obvious. The difficult time judging is when you've got kids that are really, really close to each other, right? All right. So now here's some comments here. This is where my ballot will show tons of information, right? That comment specific to Pineview KP. Oftentimes I'll take the notes from my Word document and just copy and paste them right onto the tab, right? And then if I have time, I'll go back. I'll go back to the notes afterwards. And so let me talk about timing real quick. Timing is very, very important to get the ballot submitted, okay? And by ballot, I mean the points, the selection of who won and lost, and if it's required by the tournament, an RFD. Get that in as soon as possible because the next round won't start until all ballots are submitted and the computers have an opportunity to process. And if you want to think about making a time commitment longer, delay your ballot, right? Go back. You always have an opportunity to go back and change the notes that you're giving to the individual competitors. You have time for that. And you'll usually have time to the beginning, during the course of the day to go back and make some notes, right? But turn the ballot in on time. The points, the RFD, go with it, right? Make a gut call based on what you hear and support it based on what you hear. That's all. All right. Here's a little bit more. This is probably a little bit closer to what I might do in an RFD. I would put the conclusion up there. Put the conclusion up there.
Lucas can do it, but we have to figure out.
Lucas, is he in a debate or it's not speech? There's
What?
like 4 or 5 main parts.
He's in
And
this.
it's, and it's in the highest one. I mean, the most challenging one.
I know, that's what I told her.
Thank you. What I'll often do is put sort of the bones of what I heard for each argument, right? Pro had 2 contentions, right? And that's what you hear, Russia and this. And then I'll put con attacked pro's contention 1 in this way. And at the end of the day, I bought something, I didn't buy something, I didn't understand something. One of the sides relied on something that I didn't find was relevant, right? Just think of all the ways that you can reply to people on why you made a decision on a 45-minute argument that you weren't expected to know anything about going in, right? And if it's that there was links in logic, right, that you didn't accept, fine. They can say they had a perfect link in logic all they want. You get to be the judge. That's why I've never lost, right? It's just at the end of the day, it's what did you pick up? What did you accept? What did you not accept? Okay. So this is very typical of what you might see on a pretty decent RFD. You'll see your points up there, but you'll see a couple of points on what arguments were picked up and what were accepted and what weren't accepted. Okay. That's what you got to fill out. Okay. During the round, you might think that you should ask questions. You can ask questions if you want to, right? It's your round. I've had both lay and professional judges ask debaters questions. More often than not, it's the case that they don't ask debaters questions. You can absolutely ask debaters for evidence, right? if especially if it's contended, right? So what'll happen is debater one will say, my contention one is this, and I support that with evidence A, B, and C, right? And the other side has read the evidence, and they think that evidence A doesn't say what the debater said it says, right? That they took some liberties perhaps and stretched their paraphrase, right? It happens. Believe me, it happens. And those debaters that make it real easy on judges call out that evidence. And they'll say, can you give me that card, right? Card is just an evidence, right? Just a piece of evidence. And when you hear your kids talking about cutting cards, what they're talking about is that there was an article or a piece of evidence, whether it's in Time or some journal or whatever, and they cut, just like you would with a Word document, cut, copy, and paste, right? They would cut out a section of it, and they would have that card available to them for evidence to support or contend any positions that are brought up in the debate, okay? So when you hear somebody asking for a card or a warrant or evidence, it's all the same thing, okay? It's a piece of evidence that supports their argument in their mind, okay? So if you hear debaters asking for the other party's card, perfectly allowable. It's allowable for you to ask for it. Most judges do not, right? Most judges put that requirement on the debaters for a lot of good reasons, right? But it's not uncommon or unheard of or against the rules to ask for it yourself. If that's the way that you want to judge it, ask for the card. If you think that somebody took some liberties with it and you want to judge accordingly, go ahead, right? If you want to put the onus on the other debater to call out the improper use of evidence, go ahead, right? There's not a whole lot of rules on you as a judge when it comes to debate. All right, so we've got about 20 minutes. We haven't talked about LD much. Based on what everybody said their initial interest was of PF, I really wanted to focus on PF. LD, I told you it's there, you know, the distinctions are there's some more philosophical underpinnings to it in terms of the framework. It's individualistic. Most everything after that is the same. Let's see, we've talked about frequency of tournaments, the different types of tournaments, sort of time commitment that you can expect, topics. We haven't talked about the topics at all. What kind of things are we debating? Most of it will be topics that are in the news currently. Shaylin, what's the last couple of topics that you've been debating?
So the topic that concluded the end of my sophomore year of debating was, on balance, do the pros outweigh the harms of urbanization in West Africa? So that topic was just, a lot of the pro and con doing analysis of like the rapid urbanization of West Africa and whether it's had like a negative or positive effect. My current topic that I've been prepping for like the last 2 months and already been to 3 tournaments on is should NATO significantly increase its defensive presence in the Baltic states? So this topic is kind of centered around Russia. So the pro is saying that Russia's aggressing in the Baltics and that we need NATO troops. And the con is saying that Russia's peaceful right now and putting troops will cause them to retaliate. But something you'll notice in these topics is that you never see like politicized or domestic issues. This is like for a couple reasons. Like one, obviously, just so like no one has like any strong personal biases, at least for like you as the judge or even like debaters who don't want to debate against something that they like vehemently believe in. And two, it just makes the round like a safer, better place because, when we bring politics and domestic stuff into it, with like teenagers, you can end up all over the place. Yeah. And three, it like allows us to like focus more and evaluate like the actual debate better because oftentimes judges aren't going to have like, a strong opinion on like NATO troops in the Baltics or like urbanization in West Africa, whereas they might on like a political party.
So those are the type of topics. There will be domestic topics. Criminal justice system has been topics several different times. Discrimination seems to appear at least once a year, and those sorts of arguments appear in most debaters' arguments most of the time. Just a second, folks. Sorry about that. So though, I mean, I guess the point that I would make is don't ever be surprised at what the topic is. And because of that, don't be surprised at some of the conversations that your kids want to have, right? If you find your kids talking about a topic that makes you scratch your head, assume that it's probably related to speech and debate in one way, shape, or form. The topics change every other month. And that is part of what drives some of the time commitment. But again, on the middle school level, you're not going to have much time commitment. Even at the high school level, you'll find that, the Pineview kids are big shock. They're pretty smart, and they're pretty well informed as to what's going on. So they already have opinions going in. They already have, as a team, they have multiple resources going in. And as a team, they often divide and conquer when it comes to doing some of the research and getting prepped. So we got 15 minutes left in the allotted time. I really want to open up to discussion from you all, questions that you have, and get some feedback there.
Hey, this has been pretty good. I think even though it didn't feel like fast speaking, but it was quite a bit to download.
Yeah.
We will process it one at a time. We may have more questions as we get into this more. And the first question I had is like the tab room. Is that something that we need to sign up? And do we sign up using Pineview, or is it just our name and sign up? How does it work?
Yeah, so if you go to tabroom.com,
Yep.
and then you do have to sign up, and then it's been, goodness gracious, it's been so long, but I'm fairly certain that after it looks for your contact information, then it tries to link you to a school, and then to determine whether you're a judge or a competitor. Obviously, you want to pick judge unless you want to try and reminisce on your high school years, which would be weird. But yeah, you'll pick judge, and then it'll link you to a school, and just search for Pineview School, and I think it'll probably get you there. Yes.
Yeah, Jay, we did it in about 5 minutes, during the meeting. It was pretty easy to do.
Sweet. Thanks, Christopher. Christopher or Chris, what do you prefer?
Oh, Chris is fine. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, there you go. And does it ask you, Chris, did it ask you to link to school and identify yourself as judge or competitor? Or?
I didn't choose the option yet as judge or competitor. I didn't have to yet. But school, I chose Pineview.
Okay.
I went through it kind of fast. I may have chosen judge and not realized it.
Okay. It will also give you the option to follow people. And as parents, you'll want to select that so you can see, as your kids are competing, what they're assigned to, and the results of their rounds as well. So again, less of an issue during middle school, right? But as we get competitions for middle schoolers going, even if you're not at the tournament, you can still follow from the computer what's going on with your son or daughter. So that option is in there. And then Paradigm, as we've mentioned, you'll want to put that out there. Even if all you do is put lay judge inexperienced, that's enough to get competitors to a point where they understand who they're talking to, right? Because it from their perspective, it really, really makes a difference. They've got multiple cases that they've prepared, and they just need to know who they're talking to. So that'll be helpful on Tab Room. Anything else?
I just wanted to know if you have any recordings of Pineview debates, just for us to understand how they do it and see the whole thing that you were talking about,
Right. So I don't think that we have any recordings of Pineview debates. That's actually an interesting interesting thing, Shaylin. Maybe at one of the weekly meetings, you could record some practice rounds. That might be helpful.
I have some, Rafa and I have some rounds on YouTube, but they're all in front of like paid judges and we speak really fast. So
Right.
I don't think that'd be much of use. But I don't know if you saw in the chat, I put like the 2018 national finals. And that was the first round I ever watched. They're amazing debaters and they speak slow, and it's like their panel was, I think, made up of like 8 out of 12 parent judges. So I think that could also be like a good resource. But Rafa and I could definitely record a practice round if that'll help.
Yeah, it might help, and maybe the two of you, and then as the year goes on, as long as the parents are fine with it and the kids are fine with it, maybe some of the middle schoolers might also be helpful, so that they understand that there's a big difference between folks that have been doing this for years and folks that have been doing this for a couple minutes. So yeah, I think that's a great idea. Thanks for raising that. For right now, I'd point you, as Shaylin did, point you to the YouTube resources, and to see what's out there. And again, as when you start hitting play on YouTube, if they're immediately talking too fast, find a different one. There's others that are out there. You're not going to get much from just listening to people spread if you can't
Right.
fast.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay. So I mean, that's sort of what you can expect from a round. As Jay mentioned, a lot of information. Don't expect that you would pick up much at all from this 2 hours. But what I would hope that you pick up is that there's human resources that are out there that are happy to help, right? There's parents that you're going to run into that we've been doing this for entirely too long. And one thing that you'll find is either it's Pineview parents or parents at other schools. It's a community that helps each other all the time, right? So if you have a question, if you don't hesitate to ask somebody. We've all had the exact same question, right? It's just the same things going over and over and over, but you don't think of them until you're there in the moment, right? So that's the first thing, is that there are people that are happy to help you. The second thing is that there's some written documentation that can help you. Jim circulated that in that email September 16th. Third thing is, social media is out there in this space, just like every other space. YouTube, if you just do some Google searches for speech and debate or public forum, the results are out there. You're going to get to them. And most of those can be helpful if you want to watch a round just so that your first one is not live. That's certainly helpful. But as I mentioned, I think to Fred earlier, it's absolutely acceptable, if not expected, that you show up to your first tournament and ask to sit in and observe a round, right? Why wouldn't you? So take advantage of it, especially now, when your kids are middle schoolers. Shaylin, I'm not sure what rules we're walking into with CFL this year, but perhaps if the middle schoolers can't compete, especially since it's Zoom, they can at least observe, right? And maybe that'll help their skills as well. So I don't know if that's been thought of, but let's maybe explore that so that at least the kids can get into sort of get into the game.
Yeah, so right now, Rafa and I we came up with the topic about just like should college be free in America? And so we're gonna walk them through like on like a baby topic, just helping them do cases on the active board and stuff like that. And once they kind of let them do their own small debates in which Rafa and I pause and continue and allow them to get comfortable. And then after that, I definitely think that like those who feel comfortable enough to compete, there's definitely like enough middle school tournaments now where good weekend we can definitely find something online for them.
Yeah, yeah. Even if they just want to use that to observe, right, and help their training in that way. All right. Anybody else?
Thank you for taking the time. This is not easy. So I think years of experience distilling it for us as we get on this journey. Thank you very much.
No, it's my pleasure. Happy to help. I can't impress enough that like most things in life, the more you do it, the easier it gets. And the first time you do it, you may have some nerves and uncertainty, but in very short order, you're going to get real comfortable, real confident, and you're going to be able to do what the kids need you to do, right? Which is really just show up, commit your time, listen to what they're saying, and give your best judgment on what you heard and why. Nothing more, nothing less, right? Okay. I don't have anything else. It might have been helpful to see around, but unless Shaylin wanted to debate himself, that wasn't going to happen today. And to be quite honest, we've done that in the past where we've done some mock rounds, and I'm not sure that you really are able to get much out of it. I think that the YouTube rounds will probably get you as much comfort as sort of a mini mock round would have done today.
And maybe something while you watch the YouTube round is that like take notes, and before you hear the actual judge's decision, maybe kind of come up with your own decision and who you'd vote for, and then see how that compares with the opinions of the other judges.
Right. And on Shaylin's point, I wouldn't necessarily be concerned about did you agree or disagree with the judge, right? Because remember, you're never going to be wrong in your opinion, right? My kids keep telling me that every single day. They're never wrong in their opinions. Focus on are you picking up the same things in the arguments in the RFD, right? That would really be what I would focus in on is did we talk about the same things in the reason for decision? Not did we view them the same way? Did we talk about the same things? If you're talking about the same things, then you picked up the argument, right? If you're talking about, a baseball team and the argument was about, nuclear war, you might want to go back and rewatch that video. That's really the way that I would look at those YouTube videos is at the end, would you have talked about the same things in your reason for decision that the judges did? And if you did, you're fine. And if you didn't, you're still fine because you couldn't be wrong. You still didn't lose that round.
Yeah.
Anything else? Okay. So I think you have my contact information. You certainly have Jim's. Any questions, don't hesitate, period, on anything to do with speech and debate. Happy to help. But I think, I don't know if we were supposed to get back into the big room. But as far as I'm concerned, I think we've probably covered enough of debate to make your head spin. And question your children's sanity for wanting to join this team.
Yeah.
If we're there, then I've done my job. Great. All right. Thanks, everybody. Nice to meet y'all.
Thank you. Appreciate everyone.
Nice to meet all of you too.
Thank
you very much.
Thank you.
See you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.